Well, welcome. Today we're going to learn about a program that very few of us even know exists, that Milford desperately needed, and the people who stood up and put it together. So why don't we start with an introduction?
I'm Amy Leone with Community Impact and the Milford Police Family Services Unit.
I'm Robbie Tassino, Deputy Chief of Police, and I helped organize the Family Services Unit.
Detective Steve Foss with the Milford Police Department.
Amanda Rizzoli, I am the Clinical Program Coordinator for the Family Services Unit.
I'm Ashley Hemstreet. I'm the clinician for the Family Services Unit.
Detective Sergeant Paul Pinto, Family Services Unit.
What is a family services unit?
Who wants first crack at it? Go ahead.
No, you can.
Go ahead. So, where we ended up here, how we got to the point we're at is, you remember, Al, I don't know, how long ago did we come on the show?
It was about a year ago.
Was it about a year? And the problem that we have, and this is my phrase, and they all smirk when I say it, I coined this phrase, so if this gets famous, I want credit. So, if you don't think you need mental health and wellness, you need mental health and wellness. That's what we found. It's a merry-go-round.
Guys,
What? No?
we're going to have to start again. What is going on?
It's a good intro, though. Pretty good.
There we go, we'll start again. Good news is we can start again. We only lost 1 minute.
That's good.
Get that minute of my life back.
Well, welcome. Tonight we're going to talk about a program that we first talked about a year ago, that a lot of us had no idea was available in Milford, and really wasn't till a group of really special people got together and pulled it all together. Why don't we start with introduction?
I'm Amy Leone with Community Impact and the Milford Police Family Services Unit.
I'm Robbie Tassino, Deputy Chief of Police. I'm the coordinator for the Family Services Unit.
Detective Steve Foss with the Family Services Unit.
Amanda Rizzoli, Clinical Program Coordinator for Family Services Unit.
Ashley Hemstreet. I'm a clinician for the Family Services Unit.
Detective Sergeant Paul Pinto, Family Services Unit.
We'll start with the question, what is a family services unit?
Go ahead, Robbie.
Go ahead, you sure?
Yep.
All right. So the Family Services Unit is basically many moving parts that all kind of come together when it comes to mental health and wellness, addiction, and outreach services. Some time ago, Amy and I got together, like you said, a year ago. We were on the show. And, you know, we've had the pleasure at the Milford Police Department of working with Amy and Community Impact and Chris's Corner for how many years?
Oh, almost 2 decades.
Yeah, a long time. And what we found out, and what was the biggest hurdle for us, is the services, right? You need people, you spiral when you struggle with mental health and addiction. And mental health and addiction, the two go hand in hand. Whether or not we want to admit it, we can all benefit from some mental health and wellness. And if you don't think you can, then you really need mental health and wellness, right? And what I found in Milford, being on the street, is the people that we serve, if we can make sure that they have some follow-up care, then they're not in crisis. Because, I mean, every one of these wonderful people behind me, and if there's applause, it goes to all of them, not me. The time to deal with crisis is not on the side of the road. Right? We're already behind the 8 ball. You know, when the police are involved and we have to take immediate action, that's not the time. That's not the time. We need follow-up, okay? We need outreach. We need to have house visits, all right? People with training, people with background and stuff like that. I mean, you know, I've been a paramedic 34 years besides the law enforcement side, and I would hit a brick wall until Amy and I came up with this idea of how to do some outreach and how to really reach those who are most susceptible to crisis and help them through that. And once you help them through that and help them mitigate that, with this group, you know, there's healthy ways of dealing with if you struggle with addiction, if it's mental health, and the two go hand in hand. But, you know, I'll let Amy explain about what they've been doing, and I'll just say this, you know, since January, this group here is like a group of one-armed wallpaper hangers. I get that from my father. I don't know, we're into probably 400 calls since January. About 400 calls for service for mental health and wellness since January.
That's amazing, because too many of us who grew up here, you know, if you describe Milford, it's Mayberry. You know, you're waiting for...
So they think.
You know, you look and you say, you got great neighbors, great families, everybody helps each other, but you don't look deep enough. You know, when Amy first came on and talked about the opioid problem, you know, we grew up, a heroin addict was a slimy character in the back alley of Boston doing not so nice things. And then all of a sudden you realize it could be your neighbor's daughter or son.
Mm-hmm.
The kid that you watched play soccer, the kid that you watched play softball. So, you know, the veneer of Mayberry just doesn't hold anymore, does it?
No. I mean, I think that there's good everywhere. I mean, even the people that are going through the crisis, you know, they're good people. I mean, and all that, I think the most important thing that we do is that we're genuine, and we call and we care and we follow up, and, you know, we're there when they need something. And I think that that's the biggest thing, is knowing that there's a relation, you know, building that relationship where somebody can, you know, be struggling with something a week from now, and we'll pick up the phone and call Amanda or Ashley and, you know, reach out and say, hey, I'm going through this, can you help me navigate these resources? Or, you know, we're struggling. And I think that that's the piece that was always missing. Like, we did it, you know, when the opioid epidemic, we would work with the police, and we would go to the houses, we would go to the police, to the hospital, and we would reach out and provide them the services and, you know, get them to detox and help the family. And Chris's Corner was developed, but we realized, you know, that it's not just about the addiction, it's about the trauma and the mental health and everything that they're going through. That, you know, when people say, you know, whether it's self-harming or it's, you know, addiction, it's the solution to the underlying problem. So we've got to help everybody get to that underlying problem and give them the resources and that support that they need. And, you know, that's really what this team is doing every single day. And it's amazing.
Now, family services. I mean, I would think there's no question that Milford's supporting it.
Correct.
I would think that there's no question that Milford's been supporting our police force and their efforts over the decades, mainly because our police force has been supporting us. You know, but you turn around and you say, why do we need it?
Well, and I think one of the things the state did, a whole initiative of, like, you know, jail diversion, where you would have a clinician in the police station working with a police officer, so that in these crisis situations they could provide that. Well, Paul and I had written the grant over a year ago together, really looking at, with Robbie, you know, what do we need here in the community, because we have so much. So a clinician in the police station riding along with, you know, a patrol guy wasn't really what we needed. We needed more of that behavioral health intervention program. And so we wrote it in a big complex, you know, grant, that we're the first ones in Massachusetts that have received this grant from the Department of Mental Health, to actually have two detectives and a sergeant, you know, working together with us to make this, it's a sub-separate, we're not in the police station. So our unit is at Community Impact at 12 Congress Street. We're totally, you know, like, we're still connected to the police station. It still is that, but we're in a different spot so that people can come in and feel, you know, they can talk with us, they can do whatever. It's really a different model than any of the other police stations that have just a clinician in there.
If we look, the difference between Lieutenant Pink and Robbie, coming to somebody who's got issues, how do they react? I mean, you're there in a uniform with gun. I mean,
Well, that's just it. But that's just it. You just hit the nail right on the head. So, as Amy was talking about, we were talking about the old jail diversion grants that we used to have, where the clinician would come to the station and we'd sit there and, okay, wait, somebody's in crisis. Well, we fail. You fail. Because, again, on the side of the road, trying to deal with somebody in crisis, it doesn't work. So what did we come up with? Let's get Sergeant Pinto, let's get Detective Foss, let's get the clinicians, let's get Amy, let's get follow-up to these people in most need before they're in crisis. Okay? Let's take the stigma of the guns and the handcuffs and everything out of that. Okay? Let's let them have this open dialogue with these people that need services most. I mean, if you want to talk to this group, the work that they're doing in and out of the schools that ends up bleeding over is staggering. Staggering. This COVID lockdown, you want to talk about putting people behind the 8 ball. Wow. And I'm not saying whether it was right or was wrong. I don't have that many degrees after my name. But I'm going to tell you this. From the mental health capacity, it really stymied people who were getting progress, progress whether it be with teachers, clinicians at school. Well, now they're overstimulated. And the work that this group does in trying to help them out, help them regulate, get back to the routine, get back to the things that make them part of the society, well, that has to happen before crisis. I mean, I talked to so many police officers and clinicians from other agencies. They're like, well, so-and-so, we had to go to their house and, take them out of the house and this, that, and the other thing. And they're walking around like that was a victory. We don't see that as a victory. This group doesn't see that as a victory. They see this as a failure.
when you walk in civvies, or do you wear the uniform when you're on duty?
No,
We're plain clothes.
plain
You're
clothes.
plain clothes.
Yeah.
That would, in my mind, de-escalate the tension.
It reduces stress initially, yeah, especially when you're dealing with
Absolutely.
some sort of emotional situation, whatever it may be, but it certainly eliminates a little bit of intimidation, and people just generally are more susceptible to opening up and having dialogue.
Well, I mean, I grew up, my neighbor was a police officer, so it was never a tension thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the cops we know of, we used to play hockey with in high school.
Sure.
You know, Artie Russo used to drive us to
course,
the hockey
yeah.
rink. So the uniform, to somebody like me, well, I wear a suit. You wear a uniform. But I would imagine to kids, I remember when my inherited son, 6'8" basketball player who lived with us, was at our house for the period of time, and we went down to Craft Roots. And we sat there, and Tom O'Laughlin was there with his wife, and we sat for a half hour, talked. He's my neighbor. And Chris looked at me and said, "What just happened?" I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Did you say that was the chief of police?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "You don't understand." He says, "Where I come from down south, I would not have an opportunity to sit for an hour and just socially interact with the chief of police." He said, "You know, black kids in my neighborhood just never had that."
And just building off of that, under Family Services, Deputy Chief has also encompassed the school resource officers with our team. So the communication that remains consistent with the schools, my SROs, and us, it's like a flow chart. It's continuous. There isn't, whether there's a student crisis or a crisis at home, that channel of information never goes unnoticed or unaddressed, whether it's at school that following day. So, our goal is to not have any missing gaps with services or any attention that's needed or provided, whether it's counseling at school or after school. So, and I think that's imperative to have that communication open with us and our clinicians and the services from the school on. I mean, that's our building foundation with adolescent population and the mental health crisis nationwide that we're dealing with. But here within our community, it has to start there. You talk about the community policing aspect of it. I mean, our school resource officers also are in plain clothes in our schools. And again, as their supervisor, I encourage the relationship building. I want them to look at their police officer as somebody that they are comfortable with, you know, and I and my SROs, they're not here presently, but they do an excellent job. And again, the schools are only seeing, I mean, the mental health crisis is a real thing. The needs are there. They're super busy. You can't have enough staff to support it. But I think just that overall communication with our unit and how involved we are, and I want to be more involved with the school, and again, just that mentoring partnership is
But now,
so
without
important.
your group, you've got somebody with mental health issues. Where do they go? I mean, I would imagine Uncle Ed over at the medical center, Ed Kelly's going to try and do the best he can, but it's not like he's got a lot of resources sitting around with nothing to do either.
Well, and I think that's the case. I mean, I think that's the
That's
problem.
just it.
Is that, like, you know, when many people we saw, like, that they would get handed a piece of paper, like, you can call call these places and maybe they'll help you. And so we want to be like that warm handoff. You know, if by chance somebody gets Section 12 and ends up at the hospital for mental health issues, we want to, you know, the girls are able and the guys are able to follow up and check in and call the family and see what they need and make sure that there isn't any cracks in that. If they go somewhere, it's making sure with the hospital that a release is signed so that we can follow that person all the way through. Because that's the issue, is that, you know, when you're in that situation as a whole family, saying, okay, here, make some phone calls, when you call someplace and they're like, we have a wait list of 6 months, or we have, you know, we can't get you in, or we don't take your insurance, or whatever it is, that's so frustrating and you just feel hopeless.
But wait a minute, it's November, there's snow, I'm cold. Where am I going to hang out for 6 months
Right.
if I don't know what to do?
Exactly. That's the whole point.
They do. That's how this happened. That's how this happened. We had a gentleman who everybody at the hospital was like, yep, we agree with placement, and I got this great place, and everybody's so excited, the family's excited, and they say, just can we get his insurance information? We're like, what? Can we get his insurance information? Because the only place that we have available needs this insurance. And we're like, what? Are you kidding? Well, what are your other options for him? Oh, well, we don't have any other options.
Yeah, see, there I can see, you know, when you talk about the medical center, Jeff Hopkins has said, he's never asked for somebody's Visa or MasterCard. He
Never.
treats the patient, whether they can pay or
course.
not, done.
Right.
But he's got Ed Kelly's support.
Yeah.
I mean, not that Jeff would ever turn anybody away anyway, but there's money there, there's resources there that can be applied. I'm envisioning a lot of the people that you're saving, they got nothing.
And it's about the follow-up for the small things. It's about the, I can't tell you the people that have called to praise this group to me about just the follow-up. I want to remain nameless, but I just want to say that they really helped me out, and, you know, they actually cared about what I was doing the next day. Because a lot of these people feel like they go into the hospital, and the second that the door, you know, don't let it hit you on the way out, and they feel that way. I mean, for the longest time, I was going in my pocket to get somebody their meds, you know, and this group here, you know, explains it to people, helps them regulate things, helps them get hooked up with an insurance provider that'll get them their meds. Those are the things that keep people off the merry-go-round.
And when you go in, you're treating a patient, a person, or more than not, are you treating the family that is associated with the person?
ahead.
So we do a lot of wraparound services as well. So it's not just directly the patient that is struggling, it's also the family as well. So we encompass the whole body. So everyone involved, anyone who's affected by whatever it is that is going on, we provide support for that individual and their family members as well.
'Cause I was going to say, nothing in my house happens. I hurt my foot. My darling bride is now every day taking steps to help me. So it's not just me, and that's just a boo-boo. You know, that's just a little sore. You turn around and say, if somebody really, really needed help, that must suck down all the resources of the family, if they have them.
Just the emotions too, you know, I mean, you just think of how it is whenever your children or somebody in your family is sick, everybody is just emotionally drained. So, you know, I think the mission that we've always followed is, you know, that we want to treat people the way that we want other people to treat us, you know, and if I was in that crisis, I would want others to treat me with respect and, you know, embrace me with whatever resources. And, you know, with this unit, that's exactly what we do for other families.
Well, I think we're lucky with the collateral that the police department of Milford's built up. I remember a town meeting where we were going over budget and somebody, I've never seen a town meeting shut down so quietly when they said, I want to defund the Milford police. 200 people who never stop went to crickets. It was just dead silence. Because it was something that none of us would ever consider. You know, when it came down to the SWAT team, I remember at the FinCom when it was $600,000. I know,
Yeah, it's a big nut. Yeah.
I'm cheap. I'll admit, when it comes down to town money, I'm
Yeah.
cheap. But I looked at Chris Moore and I said, God help us if we say no and something happens. And what threw us over was the fact that they said the SWAT team can be there within 45 minutes, but most of the events are over in 18.
You know, with the special operations team in town, yeah.
So you sit there and say, there are certain things that you just, for Milford, I don't need anybody from Washington or Boston telling me what's right. You know, the Milford town meeting usually does. And when they funded this program, I don't think there was any questions.
No, you know, and that's interesting, right? So we still, every once in a while, people ask questions, and I just think they don't understand because they haven't had to try and mitigate somebody who's suffering from a mental health crisis. And again, I say mental health crisis because we all could use some mental health and wellness. So this group, when she was saying working with families, I mean, that's what they do. And there are people I'm thinking of in my head, and I'm not going to think I'm too loud in my head. But they've been doing so well because of this group. Because of this group of dedicated professionals. And here's the other thing. It can't just be a job. This group
God,
here,
no.
this group here, bought, sold, they're in 110%.
But Robbie, anybody associated with police or fire, it can't be a job. You're running into the fire, into the
Yeah.
bullets. There's got to be a passion there.
You know what? You're right, though. But I'm going to tell you something, and I'm going to tell you why this group is so special. I'm going to tell you why. Because for me, if I show up someplace dressed like this, right, I have an immediate command presence. Right? Somebody said we were laughing, someone said to me, well, you're very intimidating. Well, yeah, that's kind of the point. Yeah, okay? So I can end a conflict with taking somebody into custody, right? This is going to go the way that I say it's going to go. We're going to have law and order, and this is the way it's going to be. Well, this group has to mitigate so many things and make concessions while trying to fix the problem. I mean, the frustration that must go on, you know, I only have to deal with it in a short window.
But you can put the fire out. You can arrest somebody, you know, if
But
you're
that's
dealing
not
with...
putting it out.
No, I'm saying, you could put the fire out right now.
Right.
They have to make sure that it's not smoldering.
That's right. And doesn't start again.
And comes right back.
That's right.
What is the biggest challenge you face?
don't know, in some cases, maybe compliance, as far as, or being receptive to that, you know, in most cases, it's been well received. But a couple cases, you know, you hope that maybe there was a little bit more cooperativeness, and unfortunately there were more, you know, there was more I don't know, not destruction is the correct word, but before we had to take another avenue in order to mitigate some health for that individual. There was a Section 35, and you hope there was maybe a little bit more compliance in the beginning so that we didn't have to go down this road. I'm just using that as an example. But yeah, overall,
Whatever
I mean,
Section 35 is.
Okay. So a Section 35 is when typically a family or police can petition in front of the court in order to have that loved one involuntary committed for substance use or alcohol. And in some cases, you know, before the individual gets to, you know, a very bad situation where, you know, they're causing serious harm to themselves, we want to get them into treatment. And unfortunately, a lot of times that's what it takes.
But now, you've talked to us about the problems you have with giving somebody Narcan, and they wake up and they're less than pleased that you ruined their high. I mean, I can't understand it, but thank God, because if you could understand it, it's probably because you've been there. But now, the same thing here. If you have somebody who needs help, getting over Portuguese pride that I need somebody to help me is a big enough obstacle. But if I'm also suffering from mental illness, how do you get over that?
Well, I think as Paul was talking, I was thinking of one person in particular, and I think some of the challenges, like as you were trying to explain it, is sometimes people just aren't at the point where they're ready to make a change, and that's okay. I think that's part of everybody's journey at some point in their life. But Paul mentioned this one day that, and it kind of stuck with me, was that we don't go away just because somebody's not ready to make a change right now. We continue to show up and support them. There's a few people in the community in particular that we continue to show up at their house. We continue to check in on them. We continue to support them in whatever way they're ready to receive. So that way, like I think somebody mentioned earlier, like we try to build those relationships within the community so that when that person is ready to take a step or just to want to talk to somebody or vent, we are here and they can call us anytime, and we're
You
ready
talk
to receive
about,
that.
you go to their house, their family's in their house. What can you offer me if I have no house, I have no family? Where am I? I mean, corner of the hospital?
How about we start off by offering you something to eat? How about we start there? How about we ask you, when's the last time you had something to eat? How about we get you some fresh clothes? How about we get you cleaned up? Make you feel good. Make you feel good about yourself. I mean, just listening to her talk, I mean, their journey, right? These are things that in policing never existed. You weren't on a journey. You were a problem. You're a problem, not a journey. You're not struggling. What's wrong with you? Well, let's take him to the cell. Well, let's take him to the cell today, because tomorrow we're going to be right back in the same situation. Or they can visit. They can follow up. What do you need, Al? Al, what do you need? What can we do beyond all the complicated stuff? How about the small stuff? You know what that guy said to me one day? You know what I can use to see, you know what I really can use? I'm like, what? Fix my front door. And I was like, really? Yeah. All right. I called the carpenter, this, that, you know what I mean? And the carpenter came down and he fixed the front door. We didn't have interaction with this gentleman for a year and a half over the fixed front door. I mean, you don't know what these people need until you take the time. I mean, you're very lucky. Every time I talk to you, and you know, you talk about your bride. You talk about your better half. Imagine your foot. You said your boo-boo. Imagine if she wasn't there to help you with it.
No.
Could you?
No.
Right. So, but this is the majority of people who struggle. They just need some assistance. And this group here that we put together, it's amazing the work that they're doing. And they speak Portuguese, Spanish. Is there anything else I'm missing?
English.
I know English. I missed something one day and someone said that they spoke Farsi and I was like, really? I was like, wow, that's impressive. So, but to be in the Milford community, to have this type of outreach, that's making all the difference in the world.
But now you find somebody,
Yep. What do you mean by somebody? Someone who needs help?
someone who needs help.
Okay.
I mean, hopefully you won't pick up someone who doesn't need help, but there's a man or woman that needs help. No family. Like you say, I mean, it's amazing because what you said was profound. How about a snack? Are you hungry? You haven't eaten in 2 or 3 days. Well, that's going to have an impact. But then, where can you take the person? Their homes, or
That's what this group does. They have the connections, they have the contacts, they have the resources. Me, as a patrol cop, I can feed you, I can maybe get you some clothes, but I got other calls I gotta do.
Yeah, but you have to be tactical.
But
You
they
can't
need to be
strategic.
practical.
Yeah, they have to be more of a strategic role.
Right.
because-
So
And that's what they
There's been
do.
a lot of cases where, I mean, there's even some people that want the help, that want to go to detox, and again, no beds. We hear that a lot. No beds, can't get. Amy's been fortunate enough to have, made so many, developed so many professional relationships with so many, of these community
it's unbelievable.
providers and so at times where somebody can't get a bed, a simple phone call, that same day we've gotten people into detox in several occasions. So having established professional relationships over the years, and now as we're putting ourselves out there and developing and growing further, it's making our lives, and a lot of people have certainly reached out in that aspect, which has been terrific.
And I think the other part is that when we see like a situation when, it's a homeless person, or we've come to something, that's a struggle, that we're like, okay, we need to figure out what to do because this situation didn't work, this didn't work out the way that we wanted it to, and we're gonna face this again. I mean, I think that's the thing about this team, is that we're not afraid to say we don't have the answers, we need help, we need the resources. And we pull that all together, get those people, and we don't wait months to form a meeting. It's like, it's gotta happen now, because that problem can happen tomorrow. And that's exactly what we do. We make sure, we're not a quiet group, and we will definitely say.
Amy, quiet?
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm not very quiet.
I was gonna say, I don't even know if she's the loudest one in the group. I don't know. She's got competition there. I don't know.
But along that line, here he is. He's got all his utility belt and all his tools to do his role. You're going in civvies. You could go into somebody who just mentally loses it. Isn't that a lot more dangerous for you?
It certainly is, and we usually have patrol officers that are usually generally in the area just in case something happens, which, I mean, we haven't really had many issues that we've had to utilize patrol officers, just because people realize that we're just normal human beings acting in the best interest of that person, trying to help them out the best that we can. And for me, if I do notice that someone's uncomfortable, they see the badge, I'll tuck it in and be like, how about now? Like, I'm a normal guy just like you. Like, let's have a conversation, let's find out what you need, and figure out the best way that we can help you. If I don't have the answer, there's 4 other people that I can ask to try to get the right answer for you.
But do you normally go in 2 people, 1 person? You don't go by yourself.
No, we'll usually have 2 people.
Typically, if we get a call for a mental health crisis, first and foremost, I want to make sure the clinicians that we're with, I don't want to put them in a position jeopardize any sort of danger to them. Patrol will certainly respond. Dispatch typically dispatches patrol first for all, and then we'll sign on the air and respond as a supporting unit. And as soon as the situation is detected that there's no immediate threat, we'll intervene and basically take over the scene and mitigate whatever course of action we see best fit, appropriate. But that initial encounter, if you will, the initial engagement. A lot of times, if it sounds like we have a pretty good understanding of the layout, certain places that may be more problematic than others, patrol certainly goes as well. But once we identify, you know, that it's not anything that we need to worry about, we intercept this situation.
Now, to be a clinician, I have to admit, when I think of clinicians, I think of clinical trials, you know, in very controlled atmospheres from drug companies, you know, running clinical trials, having very controlled protocols. Doesn't sound like that's your life.
No.
How do you study for that? What do you study for that?
I don't think there's any way to really prepare for this line of work fully. You know, we go to school and we get a master's degree in either social work. Amanda is social work. I went the LMHC route, which is the same as Amy, but it's mostly the same knowledge that we all get. And then I think a lot of the, you know, training just comes with experience. Amanda has a background in working with DCF. We both worked in the schools for a bit. I've worked in substance use treatment centers. So all of that experience, and obviously Amy has a lifetime's worth of experience for everybody. So I just think that having that background knowledge and then coming into this has prepared us a little bit, but it's definitely a learning experience, and we have a great team to learn from. So
Why? I don't think it's the $1 million salary that you're paid.
Why for me personally is I just love helping people. It's just growing up Portuguese, that's what you always did. You helped everybody. You helped everyone in your family, and that's just what you did. You grew up, you would help your grandparents, you know, you would help your parents fill out paperwork for school or translating at a medical appointment or whatever it may be. So I just grew up in that very nurturing, helping environment, and it just kind of carried over into what I decided I wanted to do long term.
Do you speak Portuguese?
I do, that's my first language.
So it makes it easier to deal with people
Yes.
that are Portuguese.
Yes.
'Cause I would think if my mind isn't firing on all 8 cylinders, and you're talking to me in a second or third language, it's got to make it that much more difficult.
It does, and having those encounters within the community, whether it was with a Portuguese-speaking family, a Brazilian family, a Spanish family, we've been able to reach those avenues with those families because myself, I speak all those languages, and Detective Sergeant Paul Pinto speaks Portuguese as well. So we have been able to touch upon and also provide our support and resources to those families in need who wouldn't know where to turn. They don't speak English to begin with, so they don't know who to even contact for the help. So whenever we do respond and either one of us is there, it brings even more of a sense of ease that they're going to get the help that they're looking for.
What is the biggest challenge you face?
I think the biggest challenge for me is, again, the insurance piece, especially with the immigrant population. They hit a roadblock because there's not a lot of resources available for them, but we always find a way to make that resource connection and to get them the help that they need.
Okay, now I'm confused. Because if I go to see Jeff Hopkins and his crew at the ER, I don't have any insurance. They're going to take care of me. You know, 1, because it's the right thing to do. 2, it's probably by law, they can't turn you away. But knowing Jeff and Mary and the crew down there, it's the right thing to do. You got somebody, it's cold, it's snowy, and they're just saying no?
Hey, welcome to our life. If you got the answer, I'll share it with us.
Well,
Because this is what we've come up with. Yeah, exactly. I've actually, trying to work with the hospital on the mental health side, trying to get somebody into a program, and I don't care what anybody says, there are people that do not get treated for their mental health simply because there's no place for them to go. If you think I'm lying, chime in, crew. That's horrible. Because I can take out a knife and cut off your finger, and they're going to be tripping over themselves to help you.
Right.
Okay. You suffer from mental health crisis, and there's no place to put you. Well, they're gonna do just enough to try to get you on track, or what they call on track. And then they're gonna open the door, say, good luck, follow up, do this, do that. But like your finger, without care, what's gonna happen? It's gonna stop bleeding, and you're gonna end up right back.
But wait a minute.
Same thing.
If I'm in a situation where I need your help because I have mental problems, tactically you stabilize me. It's like you said, okay, I'm an alcoholic. You put me in the drunk tank for the night.
Mm-hmm.
Tactically, you've solved the problem.
Right, great.
Tomorrow, you let me out.
Pick you back up tomorrow night
What do I do?
until you die on the side of the road.
I was going to say,
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's my merry-go-round. When I tell people this story, that's my merry-go-round. And mental health, not enough is, in this country, we fail when it comes to mental health. We fail miserably. And this is our small solution, our small march against this ebb and flow of mental health that we just don't do enough about. Because there's another thing. You want to talk about crime and statistics. Give me enough time, graph, chart, and easel, and I can show you how the vast majority of the crimes that go on link back to lack of adequate mental health. It's a fact. But cut off my hand, I'll be at UMass getting the best care you've had. Have a mental health crisis, I'm going to get a Band-Aid on my forehead. And it's up to this group to help me out, to keep me going, to keep me going.
but now, again, pardon my ignorance, but you have somebody who has severe mental health problems.
Mhm.
What do you do with him or her?
Well, and I think that that's one of the things that we've been talking about is like, what's the solution to this? Because that is, you know, when the waiting lists are so long and, or somebody doesn't have insurance or whatever it is. So one of the things that we've discussed as we move forward, I mean, we've been doing this for, you know, a few months now, is saying, okay, we need to have a therapist that's dedicated to these people. You know, the people that are kind of like, we can't get them in anywhere, but they need it. We need to help stabilize them. So that's our next step, is having a therapist who is dedicated to our unit to be able to take those clients, which we've already been doing with the therapists that we have at Community Impact, or referring them, but to say, here's this, you know, here's the help. We can do it in a short term, long term, whatever it may be for the individual case, but we've got to have the resource, because otherwise we're just, you know, trying to follow up with them, but we're not giving them exactly what they need. So this is, as you know, the unit has started, it's definitely, there is such a progression of what needs to happen moving forward. And, you know, and I think that that's what we knew, that starting off as, you know, the 5 of us, was, this wasn't gonna be enough. And we knew that there was gonna be things that we're gonna need to change and we're gonna need to add, and, you know, we're seeing that right now. And that is the one piece, because mental health is a crisis and there's not enough resources. And there's not enough therapists, and to be honest, there's a lot of therapists that are telehealth, you know, that are doing it on the computer, but I did it during COVID, we all did it during COVID, but there is nothing better than being with a human being doing counseling. And that's what people want. They want that human connection, because we've been so isolated.
See, I think of my sainted mother, who moved in with us 30 years after my father passed away. The last 3 years she developed severe dementia. You know, it's like a Portuguese family. I felt like I failed. But I couldn't watch her every minute of the day. So we had to put her over at Countryside so that she would be safe. But what happens if there was no Countryside? You know?
What's, you know, so I can think of 5 people that I used to have interaction with. 5 people that, since this unit has been up and running, haven't been arrested, haven't been brought to the hospital, haven't gotten hurt, or haven't hurt anybody else. Now, their numbers are closer to 400. Forget about that. Forget about 400. 5 out. what are 5 lives worth? That's amazing. That's amazing that this group has kept the 5 people that have been in the back of my cruiser, in my cell, strapped to a gurney at the hospital. Since this group got up and running,
And you know, to be cold, if they're not taking care of these people, you are. If you, well, not you, but the patrolmen.
absolutely.
If the patrolmen are carrying a mental health patient,
No good.
then there's bad people in Milford,
Mhm.
although we don't want to admit it, that are doing not so nice things. And now there's no police officer to chase them.
That's been a benefit so far from what I've seen as we progress. You know, again, we want to try to work on eliminating that merry-go-round, like the deputy was saying, and if we can handle these people appropriately and ease the burden off of patrol, they can certainly dedicate their resources and their energy towards other things. And seeing these frequent flyers, if you will, and putting resources in place and having some sort of solution or plan for them moving forward, because we can, that's the benefit to us. We can dedicate our time, whether it's 30 minutes or an hour with somebody. Patrol can't. They don't have that kind of time. The calls for service, I mean, I don't need to preach how busy patrol is. They're busy. I can take that individual, we've driven out of town, we've gone to extremes that you just couldn't allow patrol to do, because we can commit our time and energy to whatever that individual needs. And that is, you know, and the referrals off of patrol, they send me a lot of the reports. Hey, check in with this happened. And the following day I'm looking at my reports in the inbox, and whether it's somebody at school, that communication's been imperative, it's been great. And I think at the end of the day, patrol's been really good and receptive, because, you know, they can take a breath from dealing with that individual again and again and again, so that they can refocus and
When I think of patrol, I think of 4 cruisers. Is that about right?
What do you mean, 4 on the road at a time?
Yeah,
Minimum of 4, more like 5.
okay, but it's 4 or 5.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, using Portuguese math, if you take one mental health person and put them in the back of a cruiser, that's 20 to 25% reduction in coverage.
And if they're going in the back of a cruiser, that's more than 1, because they're in crisis. So that's 2. 2 officers, easy. Easy that you've tied up. And what did you do? What did you do? You're gonna be back here in 2 days. You're not helping anybody. You know, what
It's just
Sergeant
like we
Pinto
used to
said.
see on TV.
Appropriately.
with Mayberry, they put Otis the drunk in the drunk tank.
Yeah. Never locked the door. He was able to go in and out, right?
Sleep it off tomorrow
Yeah,
morning,
yeah,
lets
yeah.
himself out tomorrow night.
Right. What you know, Sergeant Pinto said was huge, and everything he said. The one thing that I keyed up on: deal with somebody appropriately. Appropriately. It's not appropriate to wait until you're at your wit's end, to have the cops have to force entry in your house to get you to the hospital. For what? To strap you to a bed for a couple days to go by and say that there's no place for you to go. We wish you well. You can keep the hospital socks we gave you.
And we give you the piece of paper that says,
Right? Call any of these
Call
places,
it
see what
these-
you can do.
call all these places that are full.
You kidding me?
So where do we go?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, when it comes to like the hospital, I think it's been important for us to like form the relationships with the charge nurses, behavioral health nurses, so that when we go in there, you know, we can talk with the patients and make sure that there is that warm handoff. That's the important piece, is knowing the community and all the, you know, other providers to know that we're there. You know, we did a networking breakfast and talked about, you know, the services and our unit and everything like that. There was over 200 providers there. The next day, a doctor's office called Amanda to say, I have a girl here. Within 20 minutes, she was at our office talking to someone, down with the recovery coach, and in an intensive outpatient program within 24 hours. You know, and that's what, it's the ability for all these providers to know, let's call them, and they can help you, and it's that handoff. It's another police station to say, we've got a problem, we've got this, you know, do you have any resources? And being able to help, and that's really the biggest thing, is we can be that wraparound, that warm handoff, and that follow through. And I think now what we're seeing is that we're gonna get overwhelmed. I mean, we're just gonna put it out there, like, we're gonna need more people, our unit's gonna need to grow, you know, we're gonna need another, you know, detective, we're gonna need another clinician, and, you know, the important piece is that we're gonna need a clinician that speaks other languages, because that's our population. So, I mean, I think that, where do we go? I think it's just growing and learning from, you know, the lessons that, you know, what we're learning, the mistakes, and, you know, the things that we need more resources for, or more knowledge.
Most of the people you deal with, age-wise, are they young, middle, old? I can say old now that I'm 66.
We deal with them all. We deal from juveniles who are either running away from home or skipping out at school, to elders in their home who don't have any family, who are struggling just with their day-to-day activities. I mean, there's certain elders that we just pop in at least once a week just to check in to make sure that they're okay, because they have nobody. So we are that somebody for them, and we'll go there and we'll ask, you know, is there anything you need? Like, is there something I can go pick up for you at the store? And sometimes they say yes, and sometimes it's just that welcoming hello and just having that personal interaction, because they haven't seen anybody in a couple of
And
days.
they're so thankful. Foss brought crossword puzzles to somebody because that's what they wanted. You
Yeah.
know, like, so it doesn't, you know, we go above and beyond, you know, what is it that you want? I like to do crossword
But it's
puzzles.
the gesture. It's
Right.
Robbie fixing the door.
It's being
The
human.
door meant nothing,
Absolutely.
but
Yeah,
somebody did something nice for me.
absolutely. That you matter, that you have worth. And the other thing that this group does, which I know we're running out of time, but I want to touch on, they investigate juvenile sexual assault. You want to talk about a task, and you want to talk about something that has a lot of correlation with mental health and wellness, because how do you fix that young girl, young boy that's been sexually assaulted? That's a web we can't even get into. And it's this group that is on the ground, getting the reports, doing the interactions, doing the prosecution, seeing it through the prosecution, and then the follow-up, trying to mental health and wellness. Try and put that puzzle back together.
No.
Okay.
I said before the show, I would be in jail. If I was in your spot, whatever compassion I have, somebody who's hurting a child, just would go away. I don't know what I would do. I hope I would do the right thing, but
Their driving force is the child. I'll tell you right now, their driving force is the child. And that's, like I said, you can't even begin to get into the trauma, the physical trauma, the psychological trauma, the ghosts in the attic that you have from what happened to you as a child. You know, I can't say that I know anything about that. You know, people look at me and they're like, oh, you're a police officer during 9/11, you've been a cop 34 years, you know, I'm paramedic 34 years, sorry. You must have a lot of ghosts in your attic. Compared to a child that's been sexually assaulted, I have nothing. I have sugar plums and candy canes.
especially, I mean, you come from, well, old European, Portuguese, Italian families,
Absolutely.
where the family is everything.
Yep.
You know, I mean, like you say, my life is built on a foundation of my darling bride and my two ungrateful offspring. But I'm so blessed that we have such a dysfunctional family. We do everything
Absolutely.
together. You know, on weekends, I'm with the grandkids. I know everybody says that's crazy to be with them 4 or 5 days a week, but I couldn't ask for better. Somebody to
You
even
hit the lottery.
somebody to even consider hurting.
Yeah.
When I look at my 7 and my 4-year-old, just, I don't know how you guys control yourselves.
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, obviously having young children myself, you obviously have to, you know, put on, you know, your professional outfit on for the day and deal with and just think about that child and what's the best interest for that child and stay, you know, focused on your mission and your task and remain professional. But it's very difficult to hear and see some of the things. It's the unimaginable. And at the end of the day, it is, I mean, to go home and hug my kids, it's that much more rewarding for me.
I think the other part of it is that, like, as much as we're there for everybody else in the community and all these other people, like, in a situation like that, we're there for each other too. You know, it's like if we know that the guys have been out on, you know, a sexual assault, we check in with them. And when they see that we're, you know, a little bit fried, they check in with us, you know, and we're all, I think that's the, you know, we care about each other too. And so how do we get through it? It's that we can be vulnerable with each other, you know, to get through this stuff too.
It's incredible the responsibility you're taking on, detectives and clinicians, because you could say the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's got to be the most vulnerable time of a child, because the kid didn't know. Kid doesn't do anything, could not do anything to deserve that treatment. So you'd be nervous as to what do I say?
This group here is just, you know, such a special group, and really, I'm just a guy with a thought in his head, with all the other things that rattle around in my head. But this is the group that really the rubber hits the road. This is a special group. My hope is that I can keep them healthy, I can keep them focused, and I can give them the resources. Because, you know, as a commanding officer, that's really my only job for them, is to give them the resources to continue the good work that they're doing and to pray that they continue to feed off each other. You know, they don't need to talk to me. They need to
Besides
talk to each
hoping
other.
that your program goes out of business because there's no clients.
That would be amazing.
I mean,
I'll retire.
no, but it's kind of like the fire department, that you kind of hope that you never use them.
That's right, yeah,
You know, the police
Yeah.
department, that you hope that no officer ever comes to your house.
sure.
Your program's the one that you know, my biggest prayer would be that you run out of people
Go
to
out
help.
of business, yeah, I
But
agree.
that ain't gonna happen in the next year or two.
No.
Fundamental question. I mean, Milford's been pretty good so far. You know, we funded the town meeting article.
Mhm.
We've funded other articles. But what can an individual Milfordian do to help?
Go ahead, Robbie.
Well, no, I mean, it's I hate to add more work to this group. When you see somebody struggling, you know, reach out on their behalf. You know, give an anonymous call and say, hey, you know, I live at, you know, so-and-so, 250 Main Street. That's the police station, by the way. I live at 250 Main Street, but, you know, my neighbor at 252 seems to be struggling. You know, do you think maybe someone could go by?
Can I call the 473-1113 number and say it without worrying that?
Absolutely, and we'll give you, and if you don't want to call the number to the Family Services Unit, we'll make sure the message gets there. Absolutely,
Because to
absolutely.
me, that would be the biggest thing, that if I'm here and not quite legal, I may be scared to call and report something because worried it'd come back on me. But you wouldn't backtrack.
So let me just, we don't run out of time, and I want to address that. That's an irrational fear. We don't do that no matter what the circumstance is, all right? Whether it's crime, mental health, concerns for your neighbor. I got to be honest with you, we don't care how you're here. You're here. And we want to make you whole, and we want you to make you part of this community that's whole, and it's good for everybody.
Well, as I said, I admire what you're doing. I couldn't do it, but I'm sure glad somebody is. Thank you. To our 6 loyal viewers, as always, thanks for joining us. Please make the phone call if you see something. It won't come back on you. but you'll feel a lot better if you help somebody. And as always, may God bless. May tomorrow be a better night than tonight. Good night, all.
Not too long since I've been home.